welcome to the Sword and the Rose podcast, where we go down the rabbit hole of truth and love, discovering the mystical and magical things existing around us. I'm your host, Truest Jen, and I'm so excited to have you here with me. Let's jump into it. If you were to ask the internet what the definition of a miracle is, you might come across the following: a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. Or a highly improbable or extraordinary event, development, or accomplishment that brings very welcome consequences. Or an amazing product or achievement, or an outstanding example of something. I would define a miracle as witnessing or experiencing the extraordinary unfolding of events that provides evidence of divine orchestration, the beyond human capability to align components of a bigger picture that we are usually unaware of until it has been revealed to us in synchronistic fashion. Something so perfect and precise, you couldn't make it up if you tried. Said more simply, a multi-dimensional moment unfolding with precise orchestration beyond our control. Walking my mother home to her afterlife turned out to be a series of miracles I was not expecting, but came with all the reassurance I needed to recognize our multi-dimensional nature, knowing for certain we are not confined or limited to the physical world we find ourselves living within. This is the true story and detailed account of what happened when, and just after, my mother died. Before we begin, I do need to share some relevant background to help give context for where we're going. It actually starts with a sequence of miracles I experienced years earlier, one of which involved my mom directly. When I was in high school, I was obsessed with the number 143, to the point of annoyance, I'm sure, to everyone around me. I loved the number because I thought it was lovely, literally. 143 was a universally recognized code for I love you during the era of pagers, which were still used and popular while I was growing up. If you wanted to page someone a message to tell them you loved them, you would send the number 143, which represented 1 letter in I, 4 letters in love, and 3 letters in you. Years later, when I was 22 and still obsessed with 143, it was a summer day and I was not feeling well when I finished at work and went to head home. I was upset and feeling sorry for myself that I felt unwell when it was nice out. I dreaded the idea of sitting in rush hour traffic, feeling crummy, encountering the same visual markers that I saw every day I drove the same way home. I decided to be spontaneous and at least take a different route to switch it up a little and make things more interesting. I didn't know then what I was getting myself into or how delighted I would be for doing it. As I still sat in rush hour traffic, but with new scenery, I was glad to have new things to look at. It wasn't long later, maybe a minute or two, that I looked up and saw directly in front of me a license plate that said 4 Gen 143. My jaw dropped. I was so excited. What a gift from the universe. It knows me. My frown from before was turned completely around. I followed the car for a few blocks because I wanted to get a good and clear picture. Eventually, when we both came to a stop sign on a side street, I stepped out of my car and politely approached them to ask for their permission. I didn't want to startle them, but the situation was too important to let slip away. I explained why I wanted to photograph their license plate and asked if it would be okay. They said of course, and told me their daughter's name is Jen, so they got the license plate to say that they loved her. They were hip to the code too, and they were so happy that I stopped them to tell them. The irony was not lost on me that had I not followed my internal nudge to spontaneously do something different that day, I would not have seen it. So from that point on, I grew to love 143 even more, and the stories exponentiated. I collected a trove of cherished memories and many smiles, which were often shared as I recounted the delight with others, and they too typically found it delightful. One such unfolding in particular was special in a very profound way. This is where my mom comes in. Many who knew my mom or knew about her also knew that she struggled with alcohol addiction, contributing to her death decades later. When I was in my early 20s and still obsessed with 143, my mom was making an honest effort towards sobriety and checked into a treatment facility. Part of the process for treatment involved a group session where each individual experiencing addiction wrote a letter out loud to the group addressing their family members to apologize for the impact their addiction had upon them. The purpose was to encourage accountability, vulnerability, forgiveness, and repair. After the letter was read aloud, the family members were then given the opportunity to respond. The session was about 2 hours long, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. We sat in a circle where we all faced each other. The first person to speak was at the other end of the room from where my mom and I and my family were sitting. The rotation went in sequential order from there. As we progressed through the circle and it was nearing my mom's turn to read and for us to respond, I glanced at the wall beside me with a digital clock. It was around 1:30 p.m., and there were a couple more speakers still to have their turn before ours. When it was time for my mom to read her letter, I glanced at the clock again and was astonished to see it was nearing 1:40 p.m. I was wonderstruck with sheer excitement as I considered the possibility. Will it be 1:43 while my mom is sharing? She finished at 1:42 p.m., and I took my turn to speak. I glanced at the clock one final time to see the numbers clear as day showing 1:43. I took a quick moment to comprehend the magnitude of meaning as it settled over me, and then looked at her and said, "Mom, it's 1:43. She looked at the clock, and instead of rolling her eyes or sighing a sigh of annoyance like she would often do the many other times I pointed that out before, this time was different. This time, a smile spread across her face and tears filled her eyes. Silence came upon the room as we had our moment, and I knew they were wondering what it meant. First, I responded to my mom's letter and acknowledged what she had said. Then at the end, I said, I just want to quickly circle back to that comment I made at the beginning where I told my mom it was 1:43. And someone in the circle said, "Yeah, what was that?" Feeling invited to share further, I explained to the group what it meant and how special it was to see the time aligned for us when it was our turn to share, and how normally it might bug my mom, but this time around I could see that she knew how special it was and she enjoyed it too. Everyone in the circle murmured various wows and "that's neat" comments, and I saw some people were even crying. So that experience always stuck with me as particularly impressionable. A big impact upon all of us, it would seem. Having now explained some context, let us skip ahead 20 years to this last summer of 2025. By this point, Mom had been enduring complications from liver failure for almost 10 years. She had an unbelievable and completely inspiring tenacity towards pain, which had become her normal. August 6th, though, was different from all the days before. On this day, doctors told us she would not get out of what she was facing, and they advised us she likely only had a number of hours left. They recommended taking her off all meds and IVs and letting her pass naturally. So that's what we did. And then it was August 7th, and 8th, and 9th, and onward she went still. The doctors, multiple of them, stated that time is the one thing they have no control over and cannot predict, but they reassured us they thought we were making the right choice still to take the comfort path, where there was no expectation of recovery, and to let her remaining time ride out until her imminent death, which they felt sure was fast approaching. On August 10th, my mom turned to me and said, "Okay, I'm ready to go home now." Her matter-of-fact statement came out of the blue and caught me off guard. "You're ready to go home, huh?" I said back to her. "Is that what the doctors told you, or is that what you've decided?" "That's what I've decided," she told me. And that sounded just like her. We began making arrangements for home hospice care, which my grandmother and I felt would be better for a handful of reasons. Most of all because Mom would be surrounded by her animals, which were so important and very comforting to her. Admittedly, my grandmother was rightfully hesitant about the idea of hospice, and it took some warming up to the idea to get her on board with it. I, on the other hand, had no idea what we were about to embark on and was blindly walking forward without a clue. But that's really a story for another time. Important in its own right, but not the point of this story. Mom was transported to our family home on August 12th. For several days, she persisted still, against the odds. The doctor's words echoed through my memory. The one thing we have no control over is the timing. We see it often. Patients may hold on for something significant, whatever that is to them, and then once it happens, they let go. It's as if the timing, perhaps, is up to them. As an astrologer, I deeply knew and understood that before hearing them tell me that. For the last few years, I've been using the lens of astrology to look at people's death charts, which are a snapshot of the time at which they die. And I've discovered that in every case, just as an individual's birth chart is unique and significant, like a fingerprint, but which I call the soul print, so too is their death chart very unique and significant to that person. How that shows up varies for each person, but the cosmic data is there, and it's very relevant to that person's journey. It also reflects that the time of their death was a precise exit point. Having witnessed this over and over again with several charts that I viewed, I took the opportunity to confirm what one doctor was telling me, as she stated that she had observed with her patients that their time of death seems to somehow be significant to them, as if they are often waiting for something or choosing to let go and leave at some mysterious time that is outside of anyone's control but relevant to them personally. "Yes, absolutely," I told her in response. "I'm an astrologer, and I've been looking at death charts over the last handful of years, and I found that what you're saying is exactly true. Just as the birth chart is incredibly specific and unique to each person, so too is their death chart. It is not random, it is very meaningful." I could see I had her full attention, so I explained my perspective further. I don't particularly find astrology useful as a tool for prediction, because choice will always affect things and nothing is set in stone. I more so find it valuable in hindsight, providing information that reveals relevance to things that have happened, showing and confirming that things are not random and there is always purpose and meaning in any chaos. The doctor looked back at me wide-eyed with intense attention. She then told me that her uncle was a Vedic astrologer. She and her family were of Indian ethnicity. The Vedic system of astrology was birthed in India thousands of years ago. She continued to tell me that her uncle knew exactly when his death would be and how it would happen to the very minute detail, years in advance of it actually happening. And when it occurred, it was just as he said it would be. "Wow," I responded back to her. So he was very aware and walking in alignment with his path. Most people do not have that level of awareness. Things often happen without their conscious realization, but it's as if things are unfolding from their higher self's perspective. It sounds as if your uncle saw his exit point, and also because he was walking in alignment with his soul's intention, there was no deviation from that potential. He accepted it and chose it in accordance with his purpose. I was looking at my mom's chart and timing potentials earlier this year to see if I could predict when she might pass. I saw a strong potential exit point in June, and I told her it would be a choice point. She could leave then if she wanted to. The indicators were strongly there, but that ultimately it would come down to her choice and her mindset about it. There was an incident that occurred in June, sending her to the hospital, and she pulled through it. She might be waiting for her first grandbaby to be born, who she wished for so much, and they're due to arrive in September. We've all been rallying for her to make it at least until then, and we're so close. It's only a month away. Maybe, the doctor told me. However, I really think it's a matter of days, to be honest. I'm not sure that she will hang on that long. As you know, when we first mentioned this path of letting her leave naturally without any medical assistance and just keeping her comfortable until then, the other doctors and I were all in agreement that she had only hours left. For her to still be going now is very surprising to all of us. I did pull the chart for that day, I mentioned to her. I wanted to see if it would show anything obvious indicating her exit at that time. I didn't see anything that struck me, so if she had left then, I would have been surprised. I know physically she seemed ready, but I didn't see it in the astrology. I've looked ahead as well, but like I said, I don't find it very useful as a tool for prediction. It really gives potentials and probabilities, general themes, but as you mentioned, it seems exact timing when death occurs is truly up to them, and, I will add, they may not be consciously aware of it, but rather involved with it from a higher perspective than they realize. I will say that of everything I've observed and studied, I do think that time is the most mysterious thing in the universe. To hear you say it's the one thing you cannot control is the same conclusion I've come to. We ended the conversation there. Mom arrived back at our house for home hospice on August 12th. Every day after that felt like a year. The days were long and grueling. I wasn't sure how we would get through it, to be honest, but we did. So much was learned along the way. On August 17th, I told my sweet Aunt Susie, who was a literal human angel that came to visit us and help us through the most overwhelmingly difficult situation I had ever been through. I told Susie it would be completely astonishing if she left on August 19th, the day my beloved cat had died a year before. "Well, we will have to see," she said to me. "I know it isn't long. It has to be within a few days at most." Of course, none of us were wanting for her to die, but she was in a great deal of suffering, along with those of us around her witnessing her suffering, and we all wanted her to be at peace. My aunt went on to tell me that when her dad was in the dying process, her brother had a dream he was going to pass on November the 11th. Susie and the medical staff thought he was going to leave sooner than that, but it turned out he held on a while longer than expected, and sure enough, when the morning of November 11th came around, he took his leave. He was a veteran, and I know Veterans Day was important to him, she told me. My brother had a special connection with him to have that dream and knowing. Maybe you will have a special connection with your mom to know she's leaving on Kingsley's anniversary, if that's when she ends up leaving. On the morning of August 19th, I felt compelled to sit down at my mother's bedside and meditate. I asked my mom, in thought, to let me know if there's anything we needed to know. I was thinking specifically medically, such as if we needed to adjust anything we were doing or help her in a different way, to please bring it clearly to my attention. What spontaneously came to mind in the moments that followed were not related to anything medical, but instead were very specific to her personally, which I wouldn't have thought of on my own. When I finished meditating, I glanced over at the TV near the foot of Mom's bed, which was continuously playing the same soothing song of nature video. My Aunt Susie had turned it on to help calm my mom, and it seemed to work so well I left it to continuously play on repeat. Truthfully, it helped to calm me as well. The images were nice and peaceful to look at, and the sounds were harmonic to hear. By then, it had been playing since Sunday afternoon, and it was now Tuesday morning. Suddenly, it seemed like scenes in the video were jumping out at me with meaning. When I saw a scene with a blue and yellow bird, it struck a resonance I hadn't felt before then. It reminded me of my mom's ski outfit, which were the same colors, and the bird now felt like a strong tie to my mom directly. Then I noticed most of the birds in the video were blue, and I got a sense that my mom had an affinity with blue birds, but that didn't make any logical sense to me. I hadn't really ever associated blue birds with her before, but it was overwhelming right then. I didn't hear anything, but I felt her telling me, "You'll recognize me when I come to you as a blue bird." Then another scene of a meadow within a forest stood out to me as a familiar place, even though I didn't recognize it before. I suddenly had a flashback to a camping spot we used to go to when I was a kid that looked similar, and it felt like my mom was telling me the name of the place, Backshooter Hill, a nickname that we came up with as an inside joke. Again, I didn't hear anything, but I felt as if my mom was telling me, "Terry will know where to scatter my ashes at Backshooter Hill." The thought was so left field from anything I had been thinking that it definitely seemed to come from her. She had written in her will that my brother Terry will know the place to spread her ashes, but she didn't name it. It wasn't until meditating that morning, when I asked her to tell me what she wanted us to know, that the specific location name came to mind. When I talked to my brother later on, he confirmed and understood the mission. I was now so awestruck watching this nature video that by that point had been on for days. I felt compelled to take a video of it, and lucky I did that because the video no longer exists online. I did notice all along, even before meditating, that one of the video scenes showing a tree leaf was the exact same type of tree and leaf that we used to have in our backyard. I think of that tree often, actually, whenever I'm in the backyard. When we still had a pool, I would float in the pool under the tree and gaze at the leaves. I mentioned to my grandmother when I saw it in the video that it was the same tree we used to have, and I found it so comforting. When I recorded my video of the nature video, I turned the camera on at a random point in the middle of the song, which was 9 minutes long, so it wasn't the exact beginning that I started recording from. I was absolutely astonished as I watched the video timer of my recording, and at the 1 minute and 43-second mark, the tree leaf appeared on the screen. As that day went on, my mom's breathing changed dramatically. It was very labored and a sort of huff and puff with a loud rattling that went on for several hours. I wondered if she was preparing for her exit. I continued to dose her comfort meds as directed, like clockwork. I had given 6 doses that day, and when I went to give the 7th dose, I wished it would be the last time I would have to give her a dose of morphine. I wasn't wishing for her to die, but I was wishing that we wouldn't have to continue the way that we were. I really struggled knowing how much she didn't want pain meds when she was conscious. Within minutes of giving her the 7th dose of morphine that day, her breathing slowed almost to a complete stop with intermittent gasps of air. I sat beside her and watched intently as I wondered whether she was crossing over. The last gasp of air I saw her take in was at 7:17 p.m. Minutes went by with nothing, and I realized she was gone. August 19th, 7:17 p.m., the time of her last breath. All of us, my family, the doctors, the nurses, had been waiting and wondering when the timing would be. The most elusive mystery. Now I knew. I sat there by her in a daze, feeling hardly in my body myself. I notified my immediate family members and began coming to terms with my new state of reality. August 19th, the exact 1-year anniversary of the death of my cat, Kingsley. I often told my mom that I loved Kingsley more than anything in the world. She would laugh and tell me that I can't say that. She meant that I can't favor him above others. But the love that I had for that cat was beyond anything I had felt before. When I found him on the morning of August 19th, 2024, laying in the grass under the light of the full moon above him, the full moon which was a full Aquarius moon, and Kingsley was an Aquarius, I brought his body home and woke my mom up, distraught with him in my arms. She leapt out of bed and came rushing to my side to comfort me and say goodbye to Kingsley. I told her I was sorry for waking her up in the middle of the night with something so traumatic. What a jolt that was for her nervous system. "Don't apologize," she reassured me. "I want to be awake for this. This is what I'm here for." On August 19th, 2025, as I sat beside my mother's body in the 7th hour that evening, which is the 19th hour in military time, I knew the general astrology of that day, not every detail, but other than knowing the planet Pluto was in Aquarius, where it has been for several months and where it will be until the year 2043, so pretty constantly for a long time, I didn't know of any other transits or aspects taking place with Aquarius that would be happening at that time. It wasn't the full moon in Aquarius like it was the day Kingsley died, because this year's full moon in Aquarius had already come and gone several days before. But because of the significance of Aquarius with Kingsley's passing, and because both of my brothers are also Aquarius, I wondered if my mom's time of death had some major association with Aquarius. The time a chart is set for, in this case, the time of mom's death, identifies the starting point for the chart and represents the constellation coming up over the horizon at that time. That constellation is known as the rising sign, and it's one of the most important pieces of data in a chart. It is also the aspect in astrology that changes the fastest. Every hour will be a different constellation. I wondered if the rising sign for the time of mom's death might be in Aquarius. It couldn't be, I thought to myself. What would be the odds of that? Well, technically 1 in 12, since there are 12 recognized zodiac signs and the rising sign will always be in one of them. I input the time and pulled her chart pretty immediately. I was so curious. What I saw made me gasp in shock. The rising sign for her time of death was indeed Aquarius. But wait, there's more. While that was shocking enough by itself, what I saw next blew my mind and took my breath away. I haven't been this stunned before. To explain this, I need to give a little bit of background first. Surprisingly, I had never pulled my mom's birth chart until last year. My mom was never interested in astrology until last year. I wouldn't say she developed an interest in it per se, but she started being able to hold space for me while I expressed my interest for it. Instead of getting annoyed like she used to, mostly, she admitted, because she didn't understand it or what any of the technicalities mean. In recent months, when I mentioned astrology, she would listen and nod and sometimes even respond with an authentic "wow" or a follow-up question about it. That was a big change from the rest of my life and how our earlier conversations about it used to go. I could never contain or hold back my observations of astrology because I find it completely fascinating. Of all the things I've studied and observed, I truly think the language of astrology is one of the most important things there is. The amount of data and information that it provides is staggering, but most people aren't familiar with it to understand the implications. When I finally pulled my mom's chart, realizations about her personality hit me like a ton of bricks. She was born under the sun sign of Virgo, which I always knew and understood the relevance of. She loved animals, she had a natural green thumb, she ate healthy, and she was ultra organized. She really loved her label maker. All classic associations with the archetype of Virgo. What I never knew about her until I pulled her chart was that she had a Gemini rising. putting into perspective where her wit and sense of humor came from. And when I saw that she had a Leo moon, it was like a puzzle had been solved I wasn't even aware I was trying to piece together. When Mom was diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago, she made a bucket list of things she wanted to do in order to live her life as fully as possible while she had time to do it. At the top of her list was dressing up in themed costumes and going out into various public places to engage with an audience and have eccentric experiences. That is very Leo. Leo is the archetype related to stage performance, creatively dressing up in costume, and engaging with an audience. I couldn't believe how literal the astrology was, even though I am constantly saying astrology is literal. The examples are never ending. Leo is also the fire element, and for calling my mom a fireball, spitfire, and firecracker for all of my life, it only made sense to actually see fiery Leo having such a prominence in her chart. I never could make sense of all the fire she carried from just the Virgo sun influence, since Virgo is the earth element and very practical, even somewhat subdued and introverted. Mom was very outgoing and always liked to be the center of attention. I also saw her addiction to alcohol as one of the focal points in her chart. Chiron, the wounded healer, which can represent a type of Achilles heel or a themed pattern of difficulty, was at 8 degrees of Pisces. As a water element, Pisces can easily flow without containment and is the sign most associated with addiction, when Pisces is expressed in shadow. Every zodiac sign has a spectrum of light and shadow attributes. Pisces also represents the unseen, and addictions are often hidden below the surface, either publicly occurring behind the scenes or personally being off the radar of awareness or even denied until something forces confrontation with it. At the same exact degree, still 8 degrees of Pisces, is Mom's Jupiter placement. Jupiter, as the giant gaseous planet, expands and amplifies whatever it touches in the chart. So in this case, Jupiter is expanding Mom's Chiron, the wounded healer, in Pisces. The opposition her Chiron and Jupiter make with her Pluto, the planet that represents death, among other things, can literally be interpreted as her death is involved with her addiction. It was another stark example of how literal astrology can be. I was not surprised in the slightest when I saw it. What did surprise me was when I combined my birth chart with hers. The first thing I saw when I combined our charts together was an overlap in placements we shared at 8 degrees of Aquarius. My natal Jupiter placement, along with her natal South Node placement. Again, Jupiter will expand whatever it touches in the chart. My Jupiter was touching Mom's South Node. The South Node represents habitual patterns and karma, or an accumulation of the past. South Node alignments will often indicate past life connections. At the very least, it represents karmic connections, which tend to be somewhat difficult or intense. Not always, it depends on the context. I understood immediately upon seeing it why we had such an intense connection throughout our lives. The influence of Aquarius, which, among other things, represents the unconventional, boundary-breaking innovation, especially with tech and science, the star card of the tarot, and healing as one of the 6 zodiac signs associated with healing. Definitely explains our unconventional relationship and the innovation it went through with the healing of our connection, none of which was random. It was very much written in the stars. There are only 2 places in our charts where we shared the exact same degree placement, and there are many combined charts that may not have any exact degree alignments. So it was significant when I saw the 2 that we do have. The other shared alignment is my south node at 11 degrees of Scorpio and her Neptune at 11 degrees of Scorpio, which again, with the south node, indicates a very karmic connection. And funny that both of our karmic indicators, the south node, are tied to one another. Neptune represents vision or way of seeing. So the essence of my mom's vision or her way of seeing was intricately linked with my habitual way of being, for better or worse, since we didn't see eye to eye for most of our lives. We were both surprised to find that her final years revealed to us a shared way of seeing and being. Despite having 2 shared alignments, it was my Jupiter and her south node at exactly 8 degrees of Aquarius that first caught my attention. My eyes were immediately drawn to it. If you happen to be listening to this and notice the 8 degrees in Aquarius that her and I share was the same degree number as her Jupiter and Chiron at 8 degrees of Pisces, and you're wondering whether that means anything, let me assure you, yes, it does have meaning. Astrology is a lot of geometry. 8 degrees of Aquarius is 30 degrees separated from 8 degrees of Pisces, forming a semi-sextile aspect, and it's considered a somewhat challenging dynamic that requires effort and adjustment to integrate the differing energies. A semi-sextile aspect can lead to growth, but it's not an easy or smooth flow of energy. Once again, this example shows how astrology explains, literally, precisely, and mathematically, the nature of the connection my mom and I had together. Now, having provided some contextual background, let me share with you what completely blew my mind in a way that had never been blown before. When I pulled the death chart for my mom using the 7:17 p.m. marker of her last breath, this is what it displayed. The rising sign, or starting point, of her death chart was at exactly 8 degrees of Aquarius. The most time-sensitive part of the chart that sets the starting place and defines the whole rest of the chart was the exact degree of the alignment that my mom and I shared. To witness that and know the significance of it still takes my breath away. There is absolutely no explanation for that unfolding except multi-dimensional orchestration. The odds of it randomly happening is 1 in 1,440, which is 60 minutes times 24 hours. For perspective, just 2 minutes later at 7:19 p.m. would shift the rising sign to 9 degrees of Aquarius instead of 8. Likewise, 2 minutes earlier, and the rising would shift to 7 degrees of Aquarius. If I were to try and predict my mom's time of death at all, let alone as the exact degree of our shared alignment, which I would never think of, the guess and check to even find that time of day would take a while to track down. With a time-lapse mode, it could be identified faster, but it's still something I would have never thought of. Instead, the data was given to me, and in my opinion, very divinely. The magnitude of its meaning, I feel, is still unfolding. I'm not sure I fully understand or grasp yet why it happened in exactly the way that it did, but it is overwhelmingly obvious to me it was a profound message that I was given for such a rare event. My mother only dies once. For the timeline of her death being such a precise marker in the way that it was, simply cannot be coincidence. Every bit of my being tells me it was intended somehow, and that is extraordinary. a very special parting gift, to say the least. And it has to be mentioned, I don't think her human self could think of that or have any idea of the sense of time unfolding. It was, at a minimum, her higher self, her soul, a multidimensional awareness beyond what her human personality recognized. She didn't even care about astrology when she was alive. She surely had no idea what it was doing at any given time, let alone when she was unconscious. That orchestration was beyond the standard plane of existence that she formerly dwelled in. In the moments following her transition and in the days to follow, there are several more of what I consider to be miracles. Instantly upon her passing, I began to recall keepsakes and memories I had tucked away of my mom from over the years. They suddenly had profound relevance. First and foremost, because of her transcendence on the anniversary of my cat Kingsley's transcendence, I remembered my favorite picture of all time with my mom and Kingsley sitting together on the best ever couch that my mom had given me in my first apartment. Almost simultaneously, a very special memory of my nephews nicknaming her the Cat Queen came to mind, which seemed especially appropriate then and even more so now. When it happened, my mom and I were babysitting them one night, and we were playing Monopoly together. To keep them anonymous on the internet, I disguised their actual names as Nephew 1 and Nephew 2, recording the incident with a Facebook post that I have frequently revisited over the years with the greatest sense of love and endearment. While playing Monopoly with my mom and nephews the other night, my mom was the cat piece. Nephew 1 says, "Aunt Penny, you get to be the cat queen." Both nephews 1 and 2 say together at the same time, "All hail the cat queen, all hail the cat queen." Nephew 2 says, "Who's going to be the banker?" And I say, "Me. If Mom gets to be the cat queen, then I want to be the money lady." Nephew 2 says, "Well, money doesn't last forever, so it's still better to be the cat queen. All hail the cat queen." And both nephews 1 and 2 say in unison, "All hail the cat queen." They're not wrong. After relishing the memory and appreciating its now added layer of meaning, I then walked over to the table at the foot of my mom's bed. There were 2 small yellow roses that my sweet Aunt Susie had picked from our backyard and placed in a tiny vase when she was visiting a couple days earlier. They really warmed and elevated the ambiance, and I appreciated seeing them at every look. They now shared another meaning for me, symbolically representing both my mom and Kingsley together. I turned the table into a little altar, lighting a candle my dad had gifted me when we were at the final stretch in the hospital. As I put the roses and the candle together, I gasped again in delightful surprise to see a coaster that was already on the table, which my dear Aunt Julie had made of a cat, but not just any cat, an actual cat queen, complete with a crown and scepter. Aunt Julie had made a set of coasters, and each one was a different cat image, but the one that happened to be sitting there beside the roses was the only one in the set of a royal cat. Despite the insurmountable sadness of her passing, I was continuously encountering a buoyancy of joy about her. I knew the grief would hit hard in the future unfolding, that it would find me and wrap around me, but I couldn't help sensing that what I was surrounded with was multidimensional magic, reassuring me her presence was bigger than the illusion of physical finality. The experience was simply too uncanny to not sense the truth in that. The serendipitous nods continued. Another timely message to come through on the Facebook portal one of the primary ways the universe sends me synchronicity. My darling friend Tara gifted me wise words and more relevance when she heard of my mom's passing. She did not know any details at the time, but was precisely on point. She wrote, "Sending huge hugs your way as you navigate this new season. I've always loved seeing the fun things that you have done with your mom. My heart is breaking for the thought of you going forward without her earth side. I was with my mom when she passed into the next realm, and it changed me profoundly. She left her body in December 2017, and somehow I grew close to her. I feel her presence and hear her wisdom more now than I ever did when she drew breath. Your mom will remind you she is there in a million different ways that will most often only make sense to you, and it will be wonderful." And I don't know why I feel compelled to say this, but I recall you talking once about the astrology of one of your cats passing and the timing being perfectly aligned. I feel you will, or maybe already have, find the same to be true for your mom. Later on, when I went to sort through Mom's jewelry, because she told me before she died that she wanted me to, I set aside pieces that reminded me of various family members and whom I knew my mom would want things to go to. Then I came across an owl pendant. As charming as the owl was by itself, I noticed it did not have wings. I felt like I would need to be creative, just as my mom always was, and figure out some wings for it. Mom was always finding creative ways to bring her thoughts and visions together. I accepted the task of coming up with owl wings as a personal mission to follow in her footsteps. As I continued sorting through her special pieces, setting each one aside for this person and that person, I came across what looked like blue angel wings. And I felt overwhelmingly that my mom was letting me know very strongly, for you. These are for you, not anyone else, for you. I laughed at her assertiveness, which is just like her, and because the glittery blue was very much my mother's style, not as much my style, but definitely hers. I felt the endearing gift of her wanting me to have them and appreciated the odd memento. Then it dawned on me, oh my gosh, wings for the owl. I held them up together and realized they were a perfect match in size, and that also they made a blue bird. The message echoed through my memory from the morning of the day she died. After I had meditated by her bedside, she told me, "You will know it's me visiting you when I come to you as a blue bird." I stopped and cried, of course. I had never associated bluebirds with her before, or birds of any kind really, except the hummingbirds our cats kept capturing that we wished would not keep happening. I had wondered if the bluebird association was really her talking to me telepathically, or if my mind was making it up. But where would the thoughts come from? I had no reason to think of them. I decided to accept it as possible, that it was truly a message from her, and that perhaps a confirmation would eventually come. When the owl and the blue wings came together, and how she insisted the blue wings were for me, the only item she has given me such a strong push with, it was a big confirmation that her spirit was indeed with me. From there, I turned around and noticed a big glass plate she had sitting on display on top of her dresser. It was a plate that I had myself for years, but after moving in with her, I had nowhere to put it. I asked her if she wanted it or if I should get rid of it, and she enthusiastically said she would love to have it. She would go on to use it for the last year as a tray for her beading projects when it wasn't hung up on display. One of the many creative visions she had that she found a way to make real was that she wanted a beaded doorway curtain, like the authentic ones they used to have in the 70s, which inspired the plastic replica trend in the 90s. Mom dedicated an immense amount of patience and persistence as she threaded real beads of every kind and fashion onto individual strands, night after night and day after day, for months. eventually making an entire doorway of beaded strands to create a full, authentic beaded curtain. I was in such awe. When she started, I couldn't imagine the project would ever be complete. It seemed like it would take years. But she did it in a fraction of the time I expected, because she kept at it consistently. And boy, was it glorious. Not only was looking at it captivating and bedazzling, it also inspired the greatest sense of determination. I have to say, if any word summed up my mother, determination would be it. I've said my entire life that she instilled in me a sense of determination above and beyond anything else. When there's a will, there's a way, she would always say. Over time, the weight of the beads would sometimes drop a strand to the floor, which would break apart and beads flew in every direction. A casualty, we called them. And she would salvage what she could with a cool, calm, collected, and resilient, "No problem," she said. "I'll just restring it." And she creatively came up with some problem-solving solution to address the weight of the strands. After multiple attempts and reconfiguring, but she did eventually find a way to make it work, reinforcing them at the top. And it took a few tries because the string was slippery and it was hard to secure them in place. Then she adopted a kitten who loved to play with the strands of beads and frequently pulled them down, sometimes a few at once, which of course scattered all across the floor. What had been a full doorway became a fraction of what it was. I wish I had taken a picture in its full glory. It really was an inspiring and remarkable feat. She eventually abandoned the cause because a cat will be a cat, and she moved on to other things. I noticed the glass tray that had been her beading tray sitting on display, and the bluebird on it jumped out at me. Another connection. Keeping with the relevance of birds, here's another synchronicity that unfolded. I had the kindest of neighbors when I lived in North Portland, who moved abroad and couldn't take some of their gorgeous furniture with them, so they gifted it to my mother, who always loved a good piece of furniture, especially if it came with storage. Fast forward to the day of my mom's passing. As I tried to track down a memory I had shared on Facebook from before, I came across a different memory that I'd forgotten about. It was cryptically appropriate for the time. I reposted it, and my neighbor from North Portland, Lena, happened to comment on it with a very out of the usual but incredibly applicable reference. My original post from the spring of 2024 said, "My mom just told me I'm normal. I told her to repeat what she said because she's never said it before. And she said it again. You are normal and society is weird. Do you mean it or are you just saying it?" I asked her like a reflex. She said, "Well, I've come to realize how things are so different than I thought they were. We have arrived. I wasn't sure the day would ever come, but it's come." To which Elena commented, "Yes, Jen, you are normal and people love you for who you are. God bless, best wishes, and may the bird of paradise be in your future, mon chéri." Profoundly sweet words, aren't they? Like honey for the heart. And that bird of paradise metaphor especially jumped out at me. I like to think of my mom as a bird of paradise now, and I hope she will be in my future. Such a wonderfully enigmatic thing to say that day, and Lena had no idea the context that matched behind it. Just a beautiful, divine unfolding emanating from her heart to mine. I think that's how miracles work, to be honest, by way of the heart, a frequency of love. Several days after Mom passed, I encountered 2 more miracles that had actually occurred on the day of her passing, but I didn't become aware of them until later. Both were revealed back to back within minutes of each other, and left me in awe, as these things always do. First, I checked her phone to comb through her accumulating messages and respond to what needed responses. The Friday before she died, on August 15th, I came across a text message she had been sent from a lady named Sue, who my mom recognized as Sophie's mom. For quick context, Sophie was the beloved dog of my mom's brother, Tom. He adored Sophie, and she was the light of his life. When Tom became ill, he wasn't able to take care of Sophie any longer, and my mom, being such an animal advocate, searched for a loving home that could look after Sophie. She found Sue, who was delighted to connect with Sophie and grateful for the opportunity to give her a good home. Tom passed away not long after. Over the years since, my mom sporadically kept in touch with Sue to check on Sophie and see how she was doing. Sue would share pictures and videos and expressed how above and beyond thankful they were that my mom connected Sue and her husband with Sophie. Fast forward to the Friday, August 15th, when I saw Sue's text message, and she was notifying my mom that Sophie had lived a beautiful life but was reaching the end as she had health complications they couldn't resolve and would be calling the vet out for a home visit shortly. They offered for my mom to come and visit Sophie on the upcoming Sunday or Monday, with no pressure or obligation, but a warm invitation if she was up for it. I responded back that Mom was on hospice, so unfortunately would not be able to visit, but that I had read her kind message to her, trusting what everyone says, that people can hear everything said to them until the very end when they leave their body. In the chaos of the days following, I had not seen her reply back until the Friday after Mom had already passed. Sue shared supportive sentiments and offered prayer if we were open to it. When I replied back to thank her and inform her that Mom had passed on Tuesday, August 19th, she let me know that was the same day that Sophie had peacefully passed under her favorite tree in their backyard. She did not think it was a coincidence that it was the same day as my mother's passing, and she said she admired my mom for being such an advocate for Sophie. She also mentioned, speaking from her experience, that my mom would be whispering in my ear to help carry me throughout life, even though I may not realize it. She sent a multitude of prayer and blessings for our family and wished us peace. More honey for the heart. What a tremendous gift. That got me thinking, if Mom left the same day Kingsley left and the same day that Sophie left, and she loved them so much, living her life as such an animal advocate, it dawned on me that the patron saint of animals might be a fitting name for her. But as soon as I said the words out loud, it occurred to me that she wasn't a very religious person, and I think technically to be deemed a saint, there's a very specific process that unfolds. But a patron advocate of animals is absolutely appropriate and something she would really love, so that's what I call her now. Only minutes after seeing the update about Sophie's passing intersecting with my mom's passing, I talked to my dad for the first time since she had died. He had been traveling abroad, and we hadn't had the chance to talk before then. As I explained the details of when and how, he expressed his sincere condolences, of course, but he also shared a special connection that he wasn't expecting. He had spent the majority of his trip in the Philippines, but at the time when Mom died, he had been in Singapore for a quick stopover. He found that especially interesting because Singapore is where we lived together as a happy family. My mom and I had never been to the Philippines, but we lived in Singapore just before moving back to the U.S. My parents had divorced shortly after, so Singapore was a place of sentiment, and my dad was grateful to have that connection with her as she left this world. It was another nod with the time-space unfolding as it did. Amazing that so much aligned in so many ways for so many people all at once, isn't it? Another indication to me of the multidimensional nature of time and our connection to it. She really impacted so many of us in such uniquely profound ways. When I told my dad she drew her last breath at 7:17 p.m., his response was, "Of course it would be 17. Wow, 17 minutes. That is extraordinary." I wasn't sure what he meant by that, so I asked him. He said 17 is the number of angels. It's said that 17 minutes into the hour is the passing of angels, and there is a moment of silence. The thing is, part of what brings these miracles into light is the witnessing of them. They are occurring whether we notice them or not, but when we do notice, we receive the gift that's already there waiting for us. It's a lens of perspective. Not everyone knows the old saying about the number 17 and angels, but I was so glad I had that conversation with my dad to find out, since he did know about it. If I hadn't have mentioned the time to him, it wouldn't have come up. I had certainly never heard of the association before, so it was through shared conversation that it came up to be known, and that was another gift. So many of us in my family are already feeling her presence looking over us. For me, I really started to notice her presence whenever I ask her to help me find whatever I'm looking for and can't find. The first time, I was looking for a purse that my mom had given me, but I told her to keep it still and use it, and then one day later I could enjoy it. Since that day came, I was looking around for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. For days, I had been looking, perplexed as to where it could be. I stood in the kitchen and thought, "Mom, will you please help me find your purse?" And immediately, it spontaneously came to mind that I should look inside another purse that she had hanging up in her room. I walked back to her room, checked inside the purse, and there it was. That is actually how I have learned that angels and fairies work. You ask for their help, and they lead you with spontaneous thought. It has happened with my mom a few times since then, exactly the same. I'll be looking around for a while, and as soon as I remember to stop and ask her for help, the place with the thing that I'm looking for suddenly comes to mind, and there it is. The search is over. A handful of days after her passing, my dad and I went on a very special beach trip to honor my 40th birthday. It was the most incredible beach trip I've ever been on. Indescribably fun and so rejuvenating. We came across a nursery for sand dollars, which I didn't even know was a thing. I had never seen a tiny baby sand dollar before, but we found a ton of them. The timing of that experience was interesting, since my mom's first grandbaby, who she had been wishing for so long, was born only a few days before. Our family was navigating quite the mix of emotions as we simultaneously mourned the loss of our matriarch and also welcomed the next generation of her lineage. As my dad and I walked along the shore, I wished that I would find a full-sized sand dollar. I've been on a lot of beach trips before, wishing to find sand dollars, without finding any, so it's rare when I do. At that moment, I thought, "Mom, will you please help me find a full sand dollar?" And not 30 seconds later, I saw what might be, and hoped was, a full sand dollar partially popping out of the sand. And it sure was. I couldn't believe it, just that fast. It was the only full-size sand dollar that was found that trip, and it was copper-colored, like a penny. I thought that was pretty perfect, since my mom's name is Penny. A quick scientific note to add here. The copper color indicates algae, so I set it in the sun to bleach, and now it's the typical white color a sand dollar should be. I would have kept it copper colored forever if I could, but it started to turn green, as it does. Not because of the actual presence of copper, but because of the algae. So I had it sanitized in the light of the sun. But that was the first and only time I found a copper-colored sand dollar looking like a giant penny. And that brings me to another notable unfolding. The decision to discontinue the penny was made this year in 2025. I find it pretty remarkable. The penny has been around since 1793. That's 232 years, to be precise. And the same year my mom Penny leaves this earth, the Treasury announced the last penny planchets to be purchased by the Mint, and that production will cease once the existing blanks are exhausted. The phasing out has begun. The end of an era and legacy, to be sure. A practical move from the perspective of cost and value. It does make sense to discontinue the scent. But there's something nostalgic about it and something curious I find about the timing of its end. The next synchronicity will seem roundabout at first, but it will sync up with the penny as a currency, the metaphor of its meaning, and another parallel to my mom penny. A few weeks ago, I picked up a very special book that I don't read often enough called Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. It's one of the most profound books to read and experience. It's a large book, over 600 pages, and I'm not very good at reading books cover to cover, although sometimes I do. Most often, I will pick them up and open to a page at random, finding it is always just the right thing to read in that moment. This time, as I noticed the book sitting nearby and felt compelled to pick it up, I asked my mom to please guide me to the passage that would be the best for me to read. What I opened to was something I wasn't expecting, but which matched exactly with where I was in my life and what I had been experiencing. A long creative drought and stagnancy. I often said I felt frozen, especially with communication. The section of the book that I turned to was called Staving Off Creative Fantasy, about a match girl who had lost her spark of creativity. An excerpt. This child is in a milieu where what she has, little fires on sticks, the beginnings of all creative possibility, is not valued. If you are in this predicament, turn your back and walk away. This child is in a psychic situation in which there are few options. She has resigned herself to her place in life. If this has happened to you, unresign yourself and come out kicking ass. When Wild Woman is cornered, she does not surrender. She comes ahead, claws out, and fighting. While reading that passage, the Tom Petty song, I Won't Back Down, came to mind, which was my mom's theme song. The excerpt continues. What is the match girl to do? If her instincts were intact, her choices would be many. Walk to another town, sneak into a wagon, stow away in a coal cellar. Wild Woman would know what to do. But the match girl doesn't know Wild Woman anymore. The little wild child is freezing. All that is left of her is a person who goes about in a trance. Being with real people who warm us, who endorse and exalt our creativity, is essential to the flow of creative life. Otherwise, we freeze. When women are out in the cold, they tend to live on fantasies instead of action. Fantasy of this sort is the great anestheticizer of women. I know women who have been gifted with beautiful voices. I know women who are natural storytellers. Almost everything out of their mouths is freshly formed and finely wrought. But they are isolated or feel disenfranchised in some way. They are shy, which is often a cover for a starving animus. They have difficulty gaining a sense that they are supported from within or by friends, family, community. To avoid being the little match girl, there is one major action you must take. Anyone who does not support your art, your life, is not worth your time. Harsh but true. Otherwise, one walks right in and dresses in the rags of the match girl and is compelled to live a quarter life that freezes all thought, hope, gifts, writings, playings, designing, and dancing. We see the match girl making some kind of trade-off, some kind of ill-conceived commerce in the story when the child sells her matches, the only thing that she has that might keep her warm. When women are disconnected from the nurturing love of the wild mother, they are on the equivalent of a subsistence diet in the outer world. And here I need to quickly pause before continuing to the most important part, and mention that Mom and I had a complicated relationship for most of my life, until the last couple years when we really went through a significant healing together. For the longest time, she couldn't stand it when I talked about anything I was interested in or focusing on. It was like nails on a chalkboard to her. I tried not talking about it for a while and doing things in silence, but it still bothered her. At times, it greatly upset her. In hindsight, I truly think most of that was the influence of alcohol, and particularly the hard alcohol. Her favorite was vodka. Although she genuinely tried a few times to walk the path of sobriety, it seemed bigger than what she was able to manage, and I saw that in her astrology. For the last few years of her life, she traded out vodka for white wine, and that honestly seemed to soften her and take the sharp edge off. For a long time, it felt like walking on eggshells, but in recent years, it was radically different and totally improved. We didn't have a single disagreement in the last 16 months that we lived together, which is beyond astonishing. We laughed just about every single day, and I learned so much about her. She became interested in most of the things I had to say. Part of it was likely her changed perspective in facing mortality, to be sure, but I think discontinuing her run with vodka made a significant difference. She picked up a handful of books about consciousness and the afterlife, having a new interest for the nature and experience of energy beyond physicality. I had started that journey myself out of sheer curiosity about 20 years ago, and when I wanted to talk about it back then, she had no interest. But as way led on to way, over time, things shifted. And she even told me a few months ago, "You know, we never did see eye to eye when you were growing up, but I'm finding now that you and I actually have a lot in common with how we see things, and we can even finish each other's sentences. I didn't expect that." Neither did I. In fact, it was one of the most surprising things in my life, and I almost missed the opportunity to experience it. I was busy creating distance between us, walking the other way, but the universe had a plan for melting the ice between us. Recently, Mom said to me, "The work you're doing is really important," and she meant it. That was one of those things I never dreamed of hearing, but to actually hear it was life-changing. It healed something in the core of my being and transformed a deep sadness into gratitude. The chapter I turned to in Women Who Run with the Wolves goes on for several pages, but there's one other paragraph particularly that stuck out to me. It says, "Here we have the match girl in great need, begging to be given to, offering in fact a thing of far greater value, a light, than value received in return, a penny." Pause for dramatic effect here, because it actually says the word penny. Of the over 600 pages in this book, I know this is one of the few, if not the only page, where the word penny actually appears. And it was the section that my mom guided me to read. The paragraph continues. "Whether this great value given for less value received is within our psyches or experienced by us in the outer world, the outcome is the same: more loss of energy." That part of the passage speaks to the concept of the penny being undervalued, especially since money is energy. Between the cost of making the penny and the value that exceeds its worth, literally in our system of currency, and also echoed with the written words, offering in fact a thing of far greater value, a light, than value received in return, a penny. I know. It parallels my mom's journey because she too undervalued herself, and she did not realize the true worth of her irreplaceable light. She did not realize just how much we loved her. We could tell her all day long, and we did, especially in those final days, we certainly did. But she did not comprehend the full value of her presence and how much she was appreciated. She sold herself short. This is the trick of a distorted self-perception. She is worth more than could ever be measured. As my grandma frequently says, she was such a neat lady, and she didn't even realize it. The book chapter, which my mom had pointed me to, goes on, not long later, only 11 pages, to describe the meaning of the book's title and what it means to call back what has been lost. to run with the wolves, the nurturing of presence, to regain focus and see what is before us through stopping and looking and smelling and listening and feeling and tasting, all of the senses, including intuition, stillness. I do feel the time with my mother and walking her home through the journey of her death has oddly given me that sense of restoration. I know this was only possible by the love and support of the community that held us along the way. My grandmother, the rock of our family, who rolls up her sleeves to always do what needs to be done with a graceful acceptance of responsibility. Her tenacity to maintain the endurance needed to see us all through the shadow of death was extraordinary, and her ability to do it with such a strong sense of love and even laughter is so inspiring. I was really fortunate to walk this walk beside both my mother and my grandmother, really all of our family, and friends and neighbors near and far who nourished us with their kindness, made the experience much gentler than the gruesome it could have been otherwise. And there were still gruesome parts, to be sure, but because of the loving support we were met with, we carried on with perseverance and reverence until my mother's final breath, and even after, where we were able to greet death with acceptance and a sense of peace. Of course, grief still settles over us. It's inescapable and part of the human experience. Even the happiest of memories can usher in a quick sting in the face and a guttural cry at times, but it can be embraced, acknowledged, allowed to process without judgment, so it can pass instead of stifle, until the next wave inevitably comes at some later time. I wish for anyone who knows the difficulty of walking this walk to also know the loving support that makes such an incredibly hard journey one that is also honoring and healthy. I'm so glad and grateful to have so many glimpses of my mom's indestructible spirit continuing on in the ethers, still beside us whenever we are ready to notice. It's true that it is not the same. I miss her laughter, her humming, her quirky everything, in the flesh just down the hall, if not right next to me. But this new way of her being is special in its own right. I am sure, and I hope, I will learn a lot more about what it means to connect with her multidimensionally. For now, I only really know that it's possible and actually happening, and that by itself is reassuring. One of my dear friends experienced the death of her mother when she was just a teenager. They'd been very close, and her mother, who had Cherokee heritage, was very gifted with intuition, teaching my friend so much about energy beyond physicality. After she passed, my friend experienced profound grief and struggled to continue forward without an overwhelming sense of heaviness and loss. She eventually received a clear message that her mother's spirit was around her, wanting to connect with her, but the weight of her sadness was acting like an interference in the frequency, so my friend wasn't able to notice her mother's presence still around her. She then tapped into all that her mother had taught her about love and intuition, elevating her state of being to gratitude instead of focusing on loss. And then she was able to reconnect with her mother's spirit, continuing to talk and interact ever since. Love is the way of the miraculous. I frequently told my mother in her final days, before she left this world and its physical plane, "Keep talking to me from the other side, Mom." I know I've been fortunate to have some messages, and I hope it becomes a new normal that never stops. Love is the key and everlasting. Thank you for listening.